Hey folks, it's Samuel Hewer from SamuelHewer.net, Samuel Hewer on YouTube, Samuel Hewer on Facebook, Hewer Family Adventures on Instagram. I'm here today with yet another episode of Heroes of Autism. I'm here with Thomas, all the way from the UK, who runs his own little podcast. Thomas, can you tell the folks a bit more about you and your podcast?
Yeah, sure. I am the founder of the Asperger's Growth YouTube channel. I think I've done that for about 3 years now. I also run the 40 Auti podcast, which is a podcast around mental health and autism. I'm a university graduate in biomedical sciences from the University of Manchester. I'm also a Commonwealth Gold medalist, and I used to compete for the Great Britain team in Taekwondo. I've done a lot of things in terms of public speaking and going on to radio shows, and it's all about, my goal is to raise awareness of autism as the first, and then I guess more in depth into the reason why I do things is to improve the mental health statistics around autism. That's my main goal.
Thank you, Thomas. That's quite a life resume right there already for someone so young. So what do you talk about on your podcast and your YouTube channel?
So I think with the YouTube channel, I pride myself a lot on producing content that's novel. So I try not to regurgitate information as much as possible. A lot of my experiences on there are very honest about mental health and autism. But I also give sort of realistic ideas on how to cope with those things and how to put it across to people who don't exactly have the condition or aren't autistic. Or that's usually my main focus, trying to raise awareness for non-autistic people. And then I guess the podcast is an opportunity for me to give other autistic advocates out there who don't really have the following that they should have, and sort of giving them a voice to share their experiences and opinions.
That's great, and that's also the purpose of my YouTube channel, is also to give talk to people that have actually lived the autistic experience, because I'm tired of going to autism conventions and just hearing the experts who aren't on the spectrum, who really don't know what it's like. I mean, they have a general idea. Like, I'll give them credit for the ones that put the hard work in, but to bring about the changes that people like me and you want to see for people like us, it has to come from us directly. And that is very inspiring to hear that you are bringing such an honest and non-polished approach to explain the autism experience. What led to you wanting to be so authentic, I guess, and sharing your experience?
I think there's a lot of reasons. I think it all primarily stemmed from my experiences at school. I have as well as the diagnosis of autism, I have severe mental health conditions like depression, anxiety. I have a few sort of tics that happen. I get very anxious on the night time, so pretty much every day I sort of verge the brink of having a breakdown every night. And I'm on a lot of medication for that. And I think that was sort of the baseline meaning to my YouTube channel when I first started it. But then as time went on, I started to realize that I could use the things that I've learned to cope with my mental health conditions and the difficulties that I experience as an autistic person, and translate it to other people and do some good, I suppose.
Thomas, thank you for that very honest answer, because often it's very hard to disclose just in such a public way that you have mental health conditions like depression and anxiety, and often those go hand in hand with being autistic, because our school experiences can be very challenging, as they are for any child, but due to our struggles to read body language and or sensory input issues, it can make it very hard to um, it can create a lot of other conditions like depression and major anxiety. I myself have had my own bouts with anxiety and depression, and but I've learned a lot of great coping skills, and I was hoping you could share with my viewers some of your good coping skills, ones that worked for you and ones that didn't work for you, and go into maybe the reasons why things work or don't work for you.
Yeah. What aspects? So like in terms of
Okay, for example,
autism or
how do you cope with your, your anxiety? Let's start with your anxiety. How do you cope with your anxiety?
I have sort of a difficult relationship with anxiety. It's the thing is that yes, like to some extent you can control the amount of anxiety that you have. Quite often the things that help your anxiety are often so it's like an additive effect. Like there's no one thing that um, will immediately wipe clean all of the anxiety. It's more of I have to do lots of little things in order to get to that place. And
Hmm.
so for me, with coping with anxiety, it's more or less nowadays it's me coping with it well enough so that I don't constantly feel discomfort. Um, it's very much a sort of chemical thing with me. It's not really caused by any outside influences, so it's all brewed up in my own head, I guess.
Hmm.
Um, and it's difficult. It's difficult to deal with that, especially when there's no logical or concrete reason to why. Um, I think as as bog standard as it sounds, I think the most important thing is, well, for me, would be exercise. Like I, I used to be very into sort of exercise and stuff because obviously, like I did my athletics and all that, um, and it does help. It's one of those things that takes a big chunk of your anxiety away. Not
Hmm.
all of it, but enough for me to cope like during the evenings.
Hmm.
Um, other than that, um, trying to create a space around myself where I'm able to retreat to. So somewhere that's dark, that isn't very sensory provoking, somewhere that's comfortable, do something, whether it's work, something that I'm interested in, whether it's like writing, um,
Hmm.
all of those things that sort of capture my attention but don't drive my anxiety up or don't make me feel like I have to produce.
Right.
I guess, yeah.
That was a
Uh,
really great response, and for the folks out there on the spectrum, exercise is a great way to manage because for many people that are on the spectrum, I can't speak for others, but it often is a chemical thing in our brains that there's no rhyme or reason why it's there, but it's there. And what's great about exercise, it releases the dopamine in your brain, which is the pleasure set, what makes you feel pleasure, and it changes up that imbalance that anxiety creates. Um, and
it's a
that
lot. I think it's a lot to do with sort of with the exercise. I think it's a lot to do with the endocannabinoid system in our brains. So when we exercise, um, we have this system in place that's typically associated with things like marijuana and all that.
mm-hmm,
But when we exercise, we actually activate that system. And you might have heard some things around like CBD, about sort of quelling anxiety and stuff. And when we do enough exercise, like about 30 minutes of exercise, then it activates our endocannabinoid system and it makes us a little bit more chilled out, which is why sometimes if you push yourself too hard, you can sort of feel a bit spaced out. So it
mm-hmm.
sort of dissociates you a little bit. But there is some good science to suggest that exercise does help. It's just it comes from medical doctors and stuff, and you know sometimes it can be so patronizing and all that, and you don't want to take on board what they're saying. But definitely like exercise.
And it's great hearing it from someone who actually uses not just what the experts are saying, and that what's impressing me about you so far is your body awareness of what your body can do and how it affects you. Because most people on the spectrum grow up not very attached to what their body can do and how it affects their moods. How did you reach this point of understanding? Oh, my body plays a huge part in my mood.
Um, I think it's a very slow process. Um, it's easy to get. It's with anything in life that I've tried to overcome. I've tried to write it down and analyze it and read around the subject so that I can integrate it all together. Um, so other than sort of reading about it and jotting down notes and ideas that I have about it, um, I think that's the main thing. But it can be quite hard, especially considering most autistic people have alexithymia, you know, difficulty understanding your own emotions and feeling them. So it's a lot of sort of feeling out what the differences are. For me, it's all the muscle tension in my legs. The moment that that becomes too unbearable, I know that, you know, I'm skyrocketing up and you need to catch it, you know, you just, sometimes you can't, even if you do all those little things like with your meds and things like CBD and you exercise and you do reading and you journal, sometimes it doesn't matter. And it's always good to sort of be kind to yourself in those situations, because it happens to everybody, and I've done a lot of work on it and it still happens to me. It's just one of those things, you know. So
That's great, and that's I think the huge lesson that I've learned not only for myself but doing these interviews is that for many people on the spectrum, we're so used to having aides and people like standing over our shoulder telling us when to take care of ourselves. But the true secret, folks, is learning to take care of yourself without being told to take care of yourself. And I think and I'm often asked, where do I start with that? I think learning to take care of your body and yourself is the place to start. Self-care is definitely huge, and reaching that next peak of not being, you know, of that next peak of being independent. That being said, I'm sure that you went through a lot. Let's jump back to your time in school. I'm sure for a while you didn't feel like you could be independent because of either by the stigma surrounding autism or by what people told you could and couldn't do. Can you talk us through your life experience being on the spectrum from your diagnosis until now?
it's a long journey.
We
I
got
was
time.
diagnosed when I was I was diagnosed when I was 10, and throughout school, you know, I tell this story a lot. It's almost like at some point during secondary school, everybody went away, and they all the rest of the school congregated somewhere, and I wasn't invited, and they made up all these bizarre social rules and things that you can't and should say, and ways that you have to say stuff, and I was just not in on any of it, and that was the sort of feeling that I went in at secondary school. Primary school wasn't that bad, but I didn't think at that point I had an appreciation for just how different my experience was to other people's. So it never really became a problem, because I always had sort of buddies. I had good best friends that I sort of spent most of my time socializing with. There's some difficulties, but it was more of a sense of feeling a little bit alien in primary school, just not fully grasping what's going on and why people are doing things. But in secondary school, it was definitely a lot harsher on me. I definitely felt like I was the odd one out, the alien, the outcast. And whilst I did have some friends at those times, and I did make the effort. Um, I more or less went from being quite a bubbly, sociable, friendly, caring kid to being very sort of withdrawn, quiet, not very confident. And I think a lot of that is due to that fear that you get when you're introduced to that social world of secondary school, and not being able to really pinpoint what's going to happen next. And it's a lot of stress and a lot of bullying, both physical and mental. I'd say that the mental bullying and the emotional side to it was a lot more impactful on my mental health, definitely. Um, and the physical bullying, yeah, it wasn't great. I mean, there was one point where I was pinned up against a wall by a group of guys, and they were just constantly just punching me in the balls. But that was quite a standalone thing. I've always made a point to stand up to bullies, and there has been a few occasions where I've talked to people who are sort of harassing me and say, why are you doing this? Why are you putting all your time into this person that you don't know? Do you not have anything else to do with your life? Like, what? I don't understand why you're coming here to harass us. Like, we're just trying to get on with a school day. And that seemed to clear up those instances where that physical aspect was a thing, but you can't really stop the sort of emotional rumor mongering side to things. It's very hard to deal with and very hard to process, especially with all the sensory stuff going on. It's very difficult.
Thank you, Tom, for that honesty that you just shared. And that was an incredibly vulnerable story that you told us. And I personally went through a lot of physical and emotional bullying too. And it took a lot of years for me to even forgive those people. Not even to their face, but just for myself. And I think the hugest thing that one thing my wife taught me is everyone has their story. And it seems like you went up to them and wanted to know their story rather than just their, evil. Like, that they have hardships that you're not aware of. And I'm sure that it's something you learn by actually talking to them.
Yeah, I think one of the best things that's come out of so the more philosophical side to my writing and journaling and stuff is I do think I'm not much of a I believe that people are a combination of biological aspects and the environment that they're growing up in. So it's very hard for me nowadays to not forgive people, if that makes sense.
Right.
So I know that life's complex and difficult, and there's a lot of barriers to how things are communicated, and there's lots of misunderstandings. So at any point where I have any situation like that, I just try to move on for it, if only for myself, just like how you said. I think forgiving is a very easy way, not an easy way, but a very helpful way to process traumatic things, humanizing the person who's affected you, I suppose.
Yeah. Well, her thing is she grew up in New York, so she has that whole New Yorker attitude, like, I'm walking here, like doesn't really let people bother her. And she's really taught me how to move past my bullying experiences, because something that happened now, like, gosh, like 15, almost 20 years ago at this point, because I'm in my 30s. But for a lot of people on the spectrum, they still hold on to that childhood trauma. But once she fed me that line of everyone has their own story, it made it much easier to forgive. But for our viewers out there, can you tell us about your process of not, moving on past what happened in their childhood? Because a lot of times people on the spectrum have what's called a fixed mindset, which means that like fate has already decreed this is how life is going to always go for me. People are always going to be cruel, and often we don't recognize our own power in dictating how our life goes. How have you reached that point in your life, realizing I do actually have control over my life and how people react to me.
I think it's a combination of the experiences that I've had. Um, Obviously, I've made a lot of attempts to pull up any deficits that I've had and maximize any positives that I have.
Mm-hmm.
And throughout trying to do that, and throughout trying to be a bit courageous and learn more about things,
Mm-hmm.
I've amassed a lot of experience, and especially like I think one of the most important things that needs to change is the amount of social isolation for autistic people, because from my experience, people who are on the spectrum who um, do engage,
Mm-hmm.
oops, they do engage quite regularly with other people, and they communicate and have fruitful discussions with other people, um, and they I don't think it's a fixed mindset. I just think it's when you feel like the world opposes you, and general people oppose you so much from that experience in childhood, it's difficult to view the world in a different lens in adulthood as well. And that's something that I struggled with. And it was only until I sort of had quite a bad breakup with a long-term girlfriend in my second year at university that I started to realize just how much I needed to grow, I think, and try and listen to people and give people the benefit of the doubt. And obviously, with giving people the benefit of doubt, you open yourself up to the possibility of being let down and the possibility of having bad emotional experiences. But you've always got to keep in the back of your mind that you need to try and find the right people, and the right people are around you. It's just they don't know it and you don't know it. But until you make that step and you make that promise to yourself to try and open yourself up a little bit and try and listen to people's opinions,
Mm-hmm.
it's going to be very hard not to change if you do all of those things.
That was some really, really good advice, Thomas. I think that is the hugest thing. Is the often I get asked, how do you overcome your bullying and those childhood experiences? It is learn to work on yourself and be also willing to actually listen to other people and not have your own prejudgments of them, because you're just as bad as people that you think hate you. Because they're judging you because you have autism, well, you're judging them just because they're human, and you're just assuming that they're going to be bad. And also, the huge thing that I try to teach my younger clients is not you don't have to get everyone to like you, like you said. Find the right people, and always keep that in the back of your mind. And if they don't let you down 80% of the time, that's a good friendship. Um, but just you know as much as you make mistakes, you have to allow your friends to also make mistakes. That's part of being human, and then being
Yes.
forgiving. But there isn't like a perfect script to being a perfect human being. It's just human being, just learning to accept that we are complex beings. And I think
Yeah,
you definitely
learning your
illustrated that in your experience.
flaws.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, like learning what your flaws are. I think in the society we have now, we're very much we're in that culture of just be yourself. But
Mm-hmm.
the thing is that a lot of people don't know who themselves are. Like
Mm-hmm.
it's difficult to try and be yourself if you don't know what you want to be. And
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if you had a conversation with me around about sort of the age that I was going through all the more severe end of my mental health, then you would have heard a completely different story. And it's you've got to try and move past the negatives. I think it's just keep working at it. I've forgotten what I was going to say.
That's all right. If it comes back to you, just let me know. I think that's the
No, of
huge
course.
huge thing is learning to work past the negatives. And probably my viewers are asking, how do we do that? Well, it's by doing something different and trying new things and meeting new people. Because if
Mm,
you're just sticking on reflecting on the past and analyzing what they did wrong, what you did wrong, you're never going to move past being a negative person. In order to be positive, you have to keep trying new things. And if you don't try at all, you're always going to be stuck in the past. Um, 'Cause I
hmm.
have a lot of friends who are still
Looking
just
at it,
hanging out from like high school, because that like they think that's where their world is, but there's so much more uh, to life, and there's so many more interesting people to meet. And what would be your advice, going into adulthood for a lot of young people on the spectrum? Like, how do you start forming those deep adult relationships, and understand that these are new relationships and they are going to be different from your childhood ones?
I think the most important thing is if you're looking at it in a very sort of logical way, um, the data, if you've had a bad time and you think that everybody's an arsehole and you think that everyone's horrible and that no one's going to understand you, um, you're working from a biased standpoint because your data is only from school and it's only from people that your family knows.
Hmm.
But the thing is with the world is that it's so massively expansive that there's going to be such a wide variety of people, and they
Hmm.
will be more mature. And I think one of the difficulties of school is that people aren't mature, so they're going to be more likely to disregard your feelings because maybe they're doing it intentionally or on some level, but maybe they don't realize the extent at which it's harmed you. Um, Not that it justifies it, but just having that mindset of being willing to collect
Hmm.
more data on what people are like in real life, what people are like in working life or adult life. It's very important to give yourself the opportunity to listen to other people and
Hmm.
make up your own assumptions, new, more rounded assumptions about what life is like, I suppose.
Hmm. Yeah, I think I love your analogy of looking at the human experience as data, because a lot of people like you and me are very logical thinkers, very visual thinkers, and so trying to grasp the deeper emotional stuff is hard. But if you're looking at it as, be observant of other people's behavior, and remember that, yeah, kids are, they aren't fully developed. Our brains aren't developed until we're like, what, 23, 25 years old. And
Mm-hmm.
having that understanding is, I think, huge. And that, again, the only way to get new data is through new experiences. How do you, um, but new experiences can be scary. How do you gear yourself up to have a new experience? Like, you have no idea what the social expectations are, but you have to do this activity.
So we've got three sort of scenarios that I'd suggest anybody does. I think in the first instance, um, these two examples would be finding a source of stability. So I know it's probably not the best analogy for everybody, but in sort of the town of North Yorkshire, we've got a big sort of culture around pubs and stuff. So if you were going to go to a social event,
Mm-hmm.
you want to go to somewhere that the social event's being held, but it has to be somewhere that you know quite well. So like if you want to meet new people and talk to new people, invite someone to talk or interact or go to something that's happening in a place that you know of. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and then I suppose if you know someone who you're quite close to and they provide you with a lot of stability and emotional support, um, taking that person with you to new places and having people that you know in a new place helps you to do that, I suppose. And that's the sort of two aspects about finding sort of the stability.
Mm-hmm.
Another thing is to make sure that you enter an environment where you know the context, or at least the context of conversation and what people will be talking about is a lot more limited.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're at university, join a club that is around your interest. Don't just go for any old one. It has to be something that you're interested and passionate about. Join that club, and because you'll have a better idea of what people will talk about, you can talk about the actual thing that people go to do,
Mm-hmm.
then it's a lot more straightforward and you can work from there. It's just when it's sort of out in the open, it's like, you know, that feeling of sort of going up to a stranger and just trying to start a conversation is just absolutely horrific in all senses,
Oh yeah.
because what's going to happen? Like, are these people nice? Am I coming across this way? Should I be coming across this way? Is this the right time? Are they finished doing that? You know, it's so much confusion with it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think if you want to promote that further, do something that's physical as well, because you'll get that sort of relaxation that we've been talking about.
Mm-hmm.
And when I'm sort of working out, or I'm at a sports club or something, it's easy for me to sort of have loose conversations with people,
Mm-hmm.
sort of trade words now and again. And sometimes that's all you need to progress into having actual conversations with people.
And I think that's really great advice, and that's really how you need that shared interest. That's definitely how not only conversations but new friendships are developed, and it's also how something that I get asked like by everyone is about dating, and that dating is the same way as like knowing the context of inviting your date to a coffee shop, that you know the layout, how good the coffee is, or if it's a bar, you know how loud the bar is going to be. For
Mm-hmm.
my Aspies out there that have serious sensory issues with loud noises, find a quiet bar. It doesn't have to be the most popular bar in town, but somewhere where you are comfortable so you can be yourself with your date. And that being said, leading to our next topic, like, Thomas, what has your dating experiences been like? Um,
Oh, um, I have always been quite a I think relationships and dating were very much a focal point um, throughout my teenagehood. Like, I was very
mhm,
much into sort of the romantic aspects that I've seen from movies. Um,
mhm,
but I think because I didn't really have any experience with dating or relationships at that time, other than watching movies, my
mhm,
idea of what it would be like is um, completely different. Um, but I've had quite a lot of relationships, and there are some things that always pop up as an issue, just
mhm,
as having a different brain to somebody. Um, and there are some things that are novel, and I've sort of come to terms with, and realised that in some aspects my personality could be, or the things that I do and the way that I behave in a relationship could be more healthy and different. And I always try to make those adjustments when I spot them.
mhm,
But it's a very long process. I've had about 3 or 4 long-term relationships, um,
mhm,
most of them upwards of about a year or two. Um, and I'm in a relationship now as well. But it is a difficult environment. And I think just with anything, like exposure is important, getting an idea of what it's going to be like, which is obviously difficult if it's your first time. But trying to be constructive rather than fatalistic with dating. If it goes bad, if it goes really bad, like, there's so many other people in the world. Like, just forget about that person. Try again. You know, it's being able to detach yourself from that and realizing that it's a growing process, and there are going to be difficulties with any situation um, in dating. It's difficult for neurotypical people, um,
mhm,
but just being able to firstly have the exposure, Secondly, do your reading. Like just read into dating, into body language and facial expressions and tone of voice and different sort of signs of, um, like signaling that the other person is interested in you and all of that. And that stuff is good to brush over, I think. And then lastly would be confidence. If you're confident and relaxed, then it opens up people to be confident and relaxed around you as well. And that doesn't necessarily have to come from dating. That can come from any area of life where you have to conquer something or do something that's stressful and hard and push through it, whether it's sport, whether it's like public speaking, whether it's anything in your life and any achievements. Having that confidence does transition partly to any sort of new things that you take on.
Thank you, Thomas. That was, I think some golden advice. And if I can give a personal anecdote to help my viewers who are on the spectrum that are kind of like, what is this dude talking about? So, folks, Thomas first talked about the whole thing that we watch a lot of movies when we're teenagers to learn. That's how a lot of people on the spectrum, especially, learned about dating is we're very visual. For me, my first, examples were James Bond, like how like he got all the girls. And I thought it was the words he said that got the girls. So I went out and tried those lines, and I got so much rejection. And it wasn't until I grew as a person that realized it wasn't what he was saying; it was his confidence. And it wasn't how he could be, wasn't how he's dressed or how he looked or what he said. It was the fact that he knew exactly what he wanted, and he was so self-assured. And so that started for me the journey of learning to be confident and like being yourself, and learning to be comfortable disclosing that my brain is different than the neurotypical male brain. And that leads to a lot of interesting conversations with women I've dated in the past and my wife, like learning to communicate with your partner. This is how my brain works, and this is where I feel confident. This is where I don't, and that's actually what gets the girl, I think, is being vulnerable, guys, in that way. For you, Thomas, how with your, I guess, current partner, how have you been able to talk to her and be like, hey, this is how my brain works. This is what I need. One of the hugest things for people on the spectrum is we don't often think to advocate for ourselves in a personal relationship or whatever kind of relationship. This is what I need, and be confident in asking for
it. It's a difficult thing to do that, because obviously there is a lot more hormones and differences in a relationship. It's usually a lot more intense, I guess. And sometimes it can be a little bit anxiety provoking and difficult to to talk about the differences and sort of work through some of the difficulties that can happen. It's always important to, if you do have sort of an issue with in a relationship, I found that the best way to do it is just to give yourself some space, think about it, try and think of it as a non-biased viewpoint as possible, and find ways of validating the other person's emotions and thoughts, and trying to encapsulate what they may be thinking, or obviously you'll ask them, and then try and find ways to bridge that understanding. So one of the common things would be, obviously I quite often have very bad spells of anxiety in the nighttime, and sometimes that can it can upset my partner sometimes, because obviously she wants to spend that time with me, and in the evening I'm not sort of doing all my media stuff. So I tried to explain what the experience of anxiety was like, and I said to her, try and imagine yourself in this room, but the walls were sort of metal cages and there were dogs barking and being aggressive at you constantly. And that, you know, I think we have a tendency of under exaggerating how bad we can feel or how strongly we feel something for the benefit of the other person. But sometimes it is important to advocate for yourself, as you said, and really get into depth how things make you feel and making that distinction of what you think as well. You know, just splitting up a little bit. That can always be important.
Yeah, and I loved your analogy of, like, you know, you're a cage and dogs are barking out. And I think that's great advice for anyone out there who's looking to explain to their partner how they feel. Is you're a visual person. You think in imageries. As Temple Grandin describes it, is like our brains are like Google. We just pull up all these imageries. Like, for example, when I think of the word miracle, I think of like Jesus healing somebody. The image I pull up. And so what you want to do when you go to have a conversation with your partner is pull up some images or some quick stories about that would give them a picture of what you're going through. And that's how you actually connect with someone on such a deep level, is that vulnerability. It's not ordering a martini shaken not stirred. It's those moments of, I feel like I'm in a cage and dogs are barking at me, or for me, I just like imagine if all the walls in this room are closing in faster and faster. How would you feel? Even in real life, they're not doing that. And it's what made me and my wife get so close so fast, because I was willing to be vulnerable, and so was she. And that's the other huge part I want my fellow Aspies out there to understand, is that it's a relationship like that is a give and take. Your partner is depending on you as much as you are depending on them. And once you learn to give back and forth, that's how you get past the first date, the second date, the third date. I'm not saying you have to disclose everything on the first date, because that would be too much for anyone, neurotypical or not. But over time, giving them bits and pieces of yourself, that's how you have a relationship for a year, 2 years, or marriage. But I often find people get stuck on special interests, like very on the surface things, like, oh, we're both into Metallica or the Grateful Dead or Pokemon. Like, but a lot of people on the spectrum don't know, how do I get past special interest. For you, Thomas, how have you been able to, with your partner, dive a bit deep into who she is than just, oh, you like Pikachu, I like Pikachu?
Funny thing is, we have some common interests. I think interests are important for enjoyment of everyday things, and those don't necessarily have to be things that you've come into the relationship with. It can be a case of you both finding something that you both enjoy and then doing that. For example, I've got the Wii set up, Nintendo Wii. It's quite an old console, but we played like Super Mario Bros, and we've been doing that, and that's been sort of our little task to try and complete it. 'Cause it's really hard, very frustrating. But it's sort of like a team building, relationship building kind of thing. But I guess you've got to know who you are before you try and think about who you want, if that makes sense.
Well, that makes perfect sense.
You need to know what your values are, what you want from the other person, whether it's you're very honest and you wear your heart on your sleeve, or whether it's you do like to stay a bit quiet and analyze and take the time to think about things a little bit more and be more proactive in that way. There's a whole host of different personality traits, and what you like in someone, and it could be a good quality, some other person may find it quite annoying or just not agree with that mindset at all. And it's about finding that person that has that mindset where you can just go, what do you think about this? It's like, yeah, that's what I thought as well.
Hmm.
That kind of interaction, that's just having some commonality in your views and opinions can often be good enough, or even better. Um,
Hmm.
but support as well. Like you've always got to have that level of support and care and willingness to change and learn, especially in a neurotypical autistic relationship.
Hmm. And that's really great advice, Thomas. And I think that's definitely the hugest thing is doing activities together. It's like relationships are more than just pickup lines, and confidence that is finding things like Mario on the Wii or things that you can do together, and that's how you truly learn about the other person on that deep level. Because, like you said, oh, what do you think of that experience? Like autistic people, we have a great ability to like pick out a million different details, a lot of data, as you put it,
Mm.
and but use that in your relationship. Like notice how your partner reacts to something, um, or pick out like 3 or 4 aspects of your experience together that you want to talk about after the experience is over, and that's how you keep the conversation going, and you get to know that person. Um, and there's also things you can look up online, like 100 questions to ask on a date,
Mm.
and that can really help get the conversation going to see if you guys are compatible. Um, I always like to end Heroes of Autism, Thomas, with the following question: if you could change the way the world sees autism in one way, what would it be and why?
It's a difficult one. That
Mhm.
one reason, one way. Um, I don't want people to view autistic people as being weak. Um,
Mhm.
I think that there is a large tendency of people to categorize anyone who is different or doesn't fit the norm or
Mhm.
is classified as special needs,
Mhm.
um, that they are not a full person. They're not a healthy, strong person. Um, and I try to challenge that as much as possible. I try to do as much as I can, and I try to do the things that I'm not supposed to be able to do, just so that I can prove to people that it's definitely not the case. Like especially with my fighting career, it's like nobody would question, like in the taekwondo world, nobody would question the you know the strength that I can sort of display in the ring during my fights. I tend to be quite strong, quite sort of aggressive, and um, I move forward quite a lot. And um, I'm actually one of probably the hardest hitting heavyweights in the UK. And just those things, those that strength that autistic people can have, I think is diminished greatly by the experiences that we have, and it's diminished greatly from not having positive role models that are openly autistic.
Mhm.
And if we could change that, then maybe we'd have a lot more confidence in social situations, in work, in bullying situations,
Mhm.
and I think the world would be a better place.
Thank you, Thomas. And I think you're exactly right. Like we have to show the work and show what we can do. The fact that you are a master at Taekwondo, and the fact that we need openly positive autistic role models, like person who invented Pokemon is on the spectrum.
Here's Satoshi Tajiri or something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the fact Steve Jobs, the guy who invented the iPhones, on the spectrum. Bill
Yeah.
Gates, like a lot of the heroes for a lot of people on the spectrum, Tim Burton, John Lennon, like all these people are like we've been changing the world for the better for so long, and that's who people like us should be looking for when we're younger. Just like anyone else would, that we can have, that we are completely human beings, that we have a lot of humanity in us, that we're not less. We're, as Temple Grandin often says, we're different, not less. Um,
Diffability.
yeah, different abilities, and the fact is, everyone's different. There's no, I hate the word normal because there's no such thing. And I know how we get a whole month dedicated to as Autism Awareness Month. I don't know if they have that in England, but in America we have a whole month. I would rather that month be called Difference Awareness Month, that awareness that everyone's different. And I think what you're doing is amazing, and proving that we are so strong, and that our autism actually probably taught us how to be more resilient. And all those experience that you went through in school, that I went through in school, that so many like us go through in school, those made you so much stronger, and it can make you so much more understanding than a lot of people in this world. And that's a gift. Your experiences can be seen as a gift, and it's the way we can move past a lot of the hard things we went through, is seeing everything we went through as a gift. Thomas, if someone wants to see your YouTube channel or hear your podcast or just talk to you, how can they do that?
So you can find me on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. They're all at Asperger's Growth. You can find my videos, obviously, on the Asperger's Growth YouTube channel, and the 40 Auti podcast on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. I also have a documentary that I recently released called Asperger's in Society, which is a short film about the relationship between autism and mental health, and sort of give a realistic view of what autism is in today's society. And you can find that at the website aspergersinsociety.com or on the Asperger's Growth YouTube channel. If you want to send a direct message, best way to go is social media. I always try my best to reply to everybody who replies to me. I'm sort of at that stage where I can. And if forgetting that, if you can't seem to get in contact with me, just send me an email. It's aspergersgrowth@gmail.com.
All right, Thomas, thank you so much for coming on my show today. Folks, this is Thomas from the UK. Definitely has a lot of insight into what it means to be human through the autism perspective. Thank you so much, Thomas, for coming on my show. Folks, please subscribe to my channel below. Hope to talk to you again soon, Thomas. And Thomas's too.
Subscribe to yours, though.
All right, Thomas. Thank you so much.
Cheers. See you later.